Okay. All right. Hello, Nevada County. This is David Clark Carroll with the Nevada County Tech Connection. We are an initiative of the Nevada County Economic Resource Council looking at really all things tech and manufacturing, whether this is web design like we're going to be talking about tonight, 3D printing, laser cutting and manufacturing. You know, sky's the limit considering just about everything as a chip these days. We're real pleased to have Ethan Hunter back talking to you tonight. Ethan, longtime stalwart of our web development meetup and a whole bunch of other things going on here in Nevada County. So pleased to have him do a presentation on color, which, you know, essential element of experience online. You'll always notice if it's on point or if it's not. Without much further ado, I'm going to let Ethan get to it and show you guys some awesome enlightening ways to use color.
Great, thanks, David. Let's see. Well, anyways, my name is Ethan Hunter, and I work in WordPress, and we decided to actually do this series, right? Because we wanted to actually do something broader, which is approach like how you would create a style sheet for your website. And of course, there's many aspects that go into a style sheet. You know, it's kind of what defines their look and feel of a website. And color is one of those things, you know, fonts, images, you know, defining your buttons, different things like that. But basically tonight we're going to be talking about color and and how that kind of works. So let's go ahead and we'll just jump into the talk here and I'll get us going. One second. All right, we got a color going. We got our groovy stuff up here. All right, so color, right? It's color and web design, all right? So we could talk about it forever, and each part that I'm going to talk about, we could really talk about. So and pick it apart. So I'm kind of going to give you an overview. There's probably things that I'm not going to touch on as much. So, you know, put some comments in there if you like think, hey, think about this, or, you know, or hey, I didn't think about it that way. But so color, right? Color is a big part of what we do when we're making a website, right? It's kind of what kind of all encompasses things. And there's basically a theory behind colors. There's a psychology around colors, and there are accessibility issues around colors when we talk about a website. So people that might be colorblind or have some sort of visual impairments, we want to consider them too. So there's a lot of different things that we can talk about in color and web design. And on a side note, you know, a lot of people sometimes they're going to make Shopify or they're going to, you know, use WordPress has a lot of themes. So a lot of these times these are coming with templates or already color schemes. So maybe it's something you don't have to worry about, or maybe they have the option where you can choose your own, especially if you have a brand, you know, like if you already have a color scheme for what your shop is or whatever, for example, then, you know, you're probably going to start with that. And another thing to think about too when we're doing web design is that usually we're picking a primary color, you know, so that's one of the things that we're going to do when we're first doing or trying out what we're going to do for our color palette, say, because that's kind of what we're aiming for as a color palette. So we're going to have a primary color, we're going to have a secondary color, and maybe a second or third color. We're going to have an accent color that a lot of times is going to be, you know, things to draw attention to. And then we're going to have something usually like shades. So we'll have like a gray, like a lighter gray, a darker gray, or even black and white, you know. And so we'll usually have about 4 or 5 colors that we'll choose from, as well as having black and white. So that's kind of what we're going here for. So first, let's jump into color theory, because I think that's really important first thing that we need to understand when we're talking about web design. So color theory, what is it? So color theory basically kind of has 3 basic principles, and there's a lot of other things that kind of are it's entailed in, but the main thing is we have complementary values, we have contrast, and we have vibrancy. All right, so what is complementary? So complementation basically refers to the way that we see colors in the terms of their relationship with other colors. So when a color occupies opposite ends of a color spectrum, they lead people to consider a design visually appealing by establishing a happy medium the eye can reside in. Rather than straining to accommodate a particular area of the color spectrum, the eye is provided a balance, right? Makes kind of sense, right? Have you ever seen something you're like, whoa, I can't look at that. Other than like, wow, that's really looks nice, right? There are basically two common uses of complementation. There's a triadic color combination, and there's a compound color scheme. And we'll discuss those later because there's a kind of a few more in that too, but that's the basic of it. And then complementation can take you to new heights of design and sophistication once you begin to master the intricacies of color combinations. But don't let those words like scare you. It doesn't have to be that complicated, and you don't have to lament over whether or not your colors look good. The next one is contrast, right? So contrast kind of pretty basic, right? Contrast reduces the eye strain and focuses your user attention by clearly defining or dividing elements on a page, right? So we want, black against white, gray against white or something like that. Those are, what we would call contrast, like in text and things like that. And the last one we have here is vibrancy, right? So vibrancy is all about motion of your design. Brighter colors are gonna have more energy in your design, and could definitely be effective when you're trying to provoke a response, like from your product, or you're trying to get an emotional response from somebody. Maybe you're a nonprofit and you're trying to gain that. So color does play a key in that, and that's the brighter colors. Now darker colors are like shades. They're going to relax you. You're going to kind of just allowing your mind to focus on things, so they're not going to yell at you, kind of, and so that's what we consider vibrancy. And there's another term we kind of use for vibrancy. We'll talk about that here in a second. Excuse me, throat's dry. All right, so let's get into it. So we were talking about complementary colors, right? And we were talking about triadic, but really when we look at it, we have up on the, we have complementary colors. So obviously one's right opposite of each other, right? And then we have what we call analogous colors, which are the colors in between, so you can see the green is now attached to a lighter shade of blue, as well as a lighter shade of green, but that's also playing off the yellow and the blue spectrum in there. And then you can see we also have a triadic one where we're really, drawing these really interesting, kind of parallel, obviously a triangle. And then we have another kind of version of the triadic, which is also slightly a version of the complementary, right? So we have the split kind of view here where it's a little bit triadic, but it's also kind of almost pretty much opposite. And you can see it's actually just right outside the opposite spectrum there, or the complementary spectrum. And then there's this crazy one, which you can see is a tetradic, sorry. And I would say that one is pretty wacky. I don't know how often that would be used, to try to find your palette and your color scheme. Obviously, complementary is really nice. Analogous is very nice. And I would say triadic is really nice. So, and there's even ones that are monochromatic, or they call them, I think. And those are ones that are just one color and then different shades of that color. So adding a little black or adding a little white. And we'll get into that too, because that does talk about color theory. And actually we'll do that. I think that is the next thing I want to show you. So shades, right? So we have shades here. So, hue, break it down. We have hue, tints, tone, and shade. So hue is a color, blue, green, red. And then tints are created by adding a white color to that. So making that kind of lighter. So that's another thing when we're talking about choosing different color palettes. Like sometimes you don't have to necessarily go triadic or complementary. You know, one of the next primary or secondary tones could be, you know, just a different tint. Now we have tone also. Now tone is going to be adding like both black and white. So it's going to be adding gray to that color, to that hue. And then the last is the shade itself, which is just adding black a little bit into that color. And I know it's like, well, how do I find these colors? I'll show you there as we get closer to the end. There's some tools there, because a lot of times when you are doing web design, you know, mostly I would think that people that are benefiting from this talk right now are going to be using some sort of content management system. So understanding code is not necessary, but they'll need to know, or you'll need to know when to use that or how to get that code so that you can plug it in, because sometimes to get that right perfect color, you'll need to do that. Okay, so that is shades, tone, hue. All right, so the next thing, and this is where we're talking about vibrancy again. So vibrancy is you know, what we would call like maybe warm and cool colors. So you can see here by the the picture that a lot of the yellows, oranges, reds are considered very warm colors, whereas the, you know, blues and purples and lighter or darker greens are considered cooler colors. And so these things really applied kind of overall emotional feelings and how we perceive that. And so speaking about feelings and how we perceive things, let's talk about the psychology of colors. And, you know, there's a lot to talk about in psychology of colors, but I'm not going to get into it too much. But what I want to do is just kind of convey to you some of the emotions that can be around colors, and also some of the kind of industry known things that work in business that we associate psychologically with colors. So as you can see on this graph here, we have pink, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. And each color kind of, you know, has its own little niche about what people feel. So, you know, pink is tranquility and femininity and floral and love, whereas red's power and violence, passion, aggression. Sometimes we use red like we think of a stop sign, right? So, you know, things like that, warning, you know, a lot of times you'll see red used for that. Orange, health, energy, warmth, fire, excitement. Things that even, you know, cowardice in yellow, caution, happiness, sunshine, optimism, you know, it goes on. Where we have, you know, green, you'll see that a lot in natural products, you know, so nature, you know, soothing. You can see a little bit of greed, you know, some people, I don't know, maybe money. You'd want to have green if you're doing a you know, site about money. And then blue, you know, Facebook, everybody uses Facebook, right? So, you know, Facebook comes, you know, with a lot of trust and professionalism, and you know you can rely on it. That kind of blue feels that way, and cleanliness, peace, you know, and especially when you get into lighter tones, you can see that there's, you know, some sort of tranquility and things like that. And then, you know, purple, well, obviously royalty, creativity, supernatural, magic. And, you know, these are just some people's emotions. So when you're designing too, it's really important to think about, you know, what is your target audience? What are you trying to create? What message are you trying to send? And then, you know, think about what colors would help you do that, you know, and so that's something really important, especially when you're starting to choose like a primary color. It's really important. Okay, so that is kind of emotions. Oh, and I wanted to say on a side note, like the psychology too, before we get into business, there are cultural differences too. So in some cultures, like wearing black to a funeral would be bad, and they would wear white. Whereas like say in the United States, we're wearing, you know, black, and we would probably not wear a white because that would be to a wedding or something. So understanding that too, especially when you're designing something, is if you're focusing on a certain cultural aspect of your audience, then you do want to think about how they're perceiving it, not just how you as a designer perceive it. Okay. All right, so colors. So, here's the kind of standard out there with colors. So you can see red is appetite. So sometimes you'll see that a lot used in, restaurants. There's a sense of urgency, right? And then like they're saying, these kind of call to actions, right? Yellow, great for service industries, very warm. Blue, again, trustworthy. Corporate people obviously use it a lot. You'll see it a lot in calm or tranquil meditation sites, things like that. Again, purple using, anti-aging products, right? Like that one's magical and healing and all that. Creative and imaginative. In orange, you've got, very happy, kind of warm feeling. There's again that term warm. Also good for CTAs, calls of action, because there is a little bit of accent when we're talking about accent colors in your palette. That will kind of pop in some ways, especially depending on the colors you choose. Again, green, health, nature, peace. That's a big thing. You see a lot of environmental friendly products with that as well. And it also has a calming effect. And then pink, again, femininity, youth, good health, things like that. And then black, which is very authoritative and luxurious, right? So, think of like nice, sleek things, a nice black Cadillac, right? Great for art and music. You see that a lot in music websites, a very black driven site, or sometimes in news sites when they're just trying to get you to pay attention to the text. So that is kind of the psychology of colors, right? All right, so the next one, which is one that I've really been trying to get into more, and when I first started doing web WordPress and stuff like that, kind of learned a little bit about accessibility, having to work on a few sites to make sure that they were accessible. Now, one thing I want to say about accessibility, there's no like grand fix thing when it comes to colors, for sure, because you can do all the tests that you need in order to be compliant. Right now there's a lot of ADA and stuff like that, where websites really should be accessibility compliant. And not it's like somebody's going to come down with a hammer on you, but like I read the other day, it was like making websites accessible is like not being rude to your user. So like basically don't be rude. You can say, well, I'm not gonna worry about that, it's such a small whatever. But I think it's important, and I think moving in the future, it's definitely something that we as designers, whether it's just your own website or others, should really think about. So when it comes to accessibility, the main top concern is contrast, right? So can you see things? So can you provide sufficient contrast between background and foreground, and other elements, that are how they're gonna relate to one another? Because somebody who's colorblind, they're gonna have a hard time, or somebody who's visually impaired might need a little less noise in some of the design. So I would say that use color for something to convey information, but make sure that like the navigation elements and the navigation areas are definable. So like subtle hover coloration states where you kind of change it just a little bit color may not be the best for people who are accessible. So really think about, maybe making a much stronger contrast there. And then just one note for people who are colorblind, and so that when you are thinking about that, don't ever put red and green together. Especially like on something like that, or green on top or on top of red, or vice versa. It wreaks havoc on them. And then also in color, if you're using color in your website for text, and things like that. Just make sure that you have really good contrast in that background, and that's really important. And then the next thing we're going to jump into actually is now that we've kind of gone through theory and psychology and accessibility. Those are some of the most important things I think you should think about in design. I'm going to show you guys a couple tools so that we can kind of see how all this works when you're actually doing it. Because we can talk about it, but you know, it's a lot of fun to start messing with tools. So with tools, you know, there's a ton out there. So I'm only going to touch on a couple because do your own research, find the tools you like. A lot of times, like maybe something you're using already has some sort of color picker or something in there to help you choose your palette or make sure your contrast and things like that look good. All right, so, oops. I just had these pulled up so it'd be a little easier. All right, so this one right here is my favorite. So this is the one I got turned on to, I guess a couple of years ago now, and I really, really like it. So you can see here, you go to Coolors, it's COOLORS.co. And I'll figure out a way to get those links, you guys. Anyway, so Coolors.co. So here we have on the left, we're going to choose a primary color. And, you know, we can go ahead and do whatever we want. And what I really like is you can kind of click on the image and just start changing your palettes. You know, find a color that you like. So okay, I really like this light shade of blue. I'm gonna go ahead and lock that, and then I'm gonna come over here and start playing with colors again. And I can use all these colors out here, and you can see the orange over here is obviously an accent color. You have a primary color, a secondary color, and these would be your like second or third, whatever. You know, you would use them sparingly, basically. So if you like that, you can go back in and start playing with it again. And it's pretty awesome. It'll just give you all the different color combinations, you know, you want until you go, okay. So that's one of my favorite ones for picking a palette. It's really easy. Okay, so that's that one. Let's talk really quick about ColorSafe, which is a great website where you can use different codes in here. I'm not going to go into too much depth with this one because I haven't messed with it too much, but you can use different colors in here to pick and make sure that you have a good ratio up here. And so what I'll show you is the tool that I like to use when it comes to contrast. And this tool is called Contrast, but that's with a K, Kontrast. All right, so now we're at the beginning of Cooler's website. And basically what it is it's a browser extension that I use on Chrome, and I think you can do it on Mozilla too. And so basically you go up here, and I have it already installed, and down here below, you can see now I can pick colors. So let's just say we want to make sure that this color and this color are compliant. So we can go ahead and pick the first color, which black and white is just going to be compliant anyways. And then we'll pick our background over here. And you can see there's your rating down below. And so I think that that's a really great tool to have when you're designing, just to make sure that all your contrasts and your colors look really good. And then another one that I like to use is Colorzilla, and that's Color Zilla. And that's another extension. And I use it up here. So say you're on a website and you want to know what that color is. Well, you go up here and you click up here, and now you can see I've activated the dropper. And now I can click on the color that I want. And now it saves it to my clipboard and copy, and I can open up the color picker, and right here it'll give me all the codes that I would need. This is probably the mostly used code that you're going to use right here, the hex code. And also with this, it also has many different other options. So you've got like a web color and not analyzer, a palette creator with your browser, and a gradient generator too. And so those are really great tools when you're trying to figure out your color palette, especially before you go to coolers, like I showed you earlier, where you would be trying to, maybe you're going to come with a primary color. So that would be one way to go and find that color originally. All right, so if that is not fun enough for you, we've gone through the contrast, the colors, save Colorzilla, and coolers. One that's really great, and like I said, there's many out there, is Color Adobe. And this is a great, great tool to just mess around with color. And you can see you can create a palette down here. And I'm not going to go into too much on how you can use it, but it gives you all these different hues. It gives you all the code. It gives you the different types. So right now we've got it on analogous. And then, monochromatic. So that's what I was talking about, where you literally just changing the shade or the tint. You've got the Triad, and you've got the Complementary. I mean, it gets crazy, right? So these are all really fun things too. And as you see, as I move them around, it's also changing my color palette. So it's giving me my primary all the way down to my accent. And I think that's, I think that's pretty cool. So this is a great one right here to just play around real easily to. I like coolers a little bit more just because it just randomly gives me stuff. But if you really want to mess with that color a lot more, this is a great tool. All right, and there's tons more tools out there. So these are just the ones that I use the contrast a lot, which is your contrast checker, which is great for accessibility. I use Colorzilla a lot because that's, anytime I'm on a website, like, what is that color? I can grab it. I can even grab colors out of like images. So if I really want to like dial in something, or I'm going to use this really nice image and I want that to match, you can do that. Yes, and then I use coolers for palette creation, which is what I like. But like I said, there's tons of tools out there. There's tons of different ways to approach things. I wasn't able to, we didn't go into tons of detail on everything when it comes to web design, but I'm hoping that, like, basically I've given you a pretty good understanding of, what web design color and how to kind of apply it, what the theory behind it is, what the psychology is, what you should think about when you're designing for people who have accessibility issues, and there's some great tools out there. Now, I also want to say that, as you can see at the end, my picture here, absolutely no color, completely conveying a message. You've got black and white and some different tints and color. So sometimes you can make a website or an image or whatever it is to convey your message without color at all. So rules can be broken, but mostly shouldn't be. And that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that talk.
That was just great, Ethan. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I do have a fork in the road to take us down.
Yeah, right on.
Now, this is partly selfish because it's something I've been working with my own website on WordPress.
Right.
And as an avid user of dark mode,
Yeah.
Particularly on mobile devices, just kind of with that as a launching point, how do you think about making it accessible for users using dark mode? Do you, let's say, fork it and have a different color palette for the mobile site as opposed to the desktop site? How do you kind of work around the fact that some of us are viewing websites in dark mode?
I have messed around with dark mode too because I have that as well and I use it a lot. Um, I haven't, I personally haven't designed anything differently. Mainly because I feel like, especially a lot of the software that's kind of out there, everyone's interpreting that website differently. And one thing that I've noticed when I'm switching and toggling from dark to light mode, I've used a couple different software and they define it differently. And really, it just comes down to contrast. So a lot of times in dark mode, you kind of lose a lot of that color, you know. But I do think when it comes to dark mode, what can shine is really nailing that contrast, and I think that that's important. Maybe your vibrancy isn't going to be there, you're not going to have as much complementary color, but making sure that contrast is good, because I have been at sites where when you put on dark mode, you're like, dude, I can't even read this, because they didn't think about that in the design process. And that's not just a flaw for dark mode, that's just a flaw in not thinking about your contrast. So my personal experience has not been to design for dark mode, just because I think it's kind of new, and I don't think the majority of users are using it. I try to design for accessibility, so I do keep those people in mind. But when it comes to people flipping a switch on dark mode, and then I think that they're making a choice, I guess, at that point to kind of tweak the design initially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's my personal take on it.
It's gonna be interesting to see, because now it's just a stock option on your standard Facebook app. You can have the whole thing in dark mode the whole time, and I wonder if that's going to disseminate further out into the world of web, because for me at least, it's the contrast is there, which makes it easier to look at. So I think you have an excellent point of, don't worry about people like me who are using dark mode. Nail your contrast,
Exactly.
and you'll meet all the customers, and it'll be just fine.
Yes, and I think that you're still having usability for those people who have accessibility issues, and in a way, I guess a good perk is you are helping those people that are flipping dark mode. So.
Well, cool.
Yeah, and so next month, just plugging now, we'll talk about fonts, and we'll go into that as far as working on the style sheet, which I talked about early. So we'll be able to take all those kind of elements and then say, okay, now this is how you can approach your site. But go out there tomorrow and start messing with your color. It's kind of unlimited. So
very cool. Thanks so much, Ethan. I think this is everyone who had to increase their web presence radically over the last year. Maybe you have a chance to take a breath. Think about, how do I want this to actually look like?
Exactly.
Just sit pants running.
Exactly. I agree.
So really glad to have this series brought back. We may not have the weekly web development or bi-monthly, however frequently it was going on. It's been so long already since we had stuff happening. So thanks so much for doing this, Ethan. And we'll be back next month with Ethan talking about font.
Yeah, the last was the fourth Tuesday of every month, 6 o'clock.
It's fantastic to have it back on track.
All right.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, David. Bye, guys.